Hello everybody and welcome to my garden in Rutland. It's a very lovely county and I'm so sorry that so many people will miss out on visiting gardens in Rutland this year, as they will miss out on visiting gardens all over the country. It's very special what the National Garden Scheme does. Last year it managed to raise £3 million for the most wonderful charities. There are spin-offs as well. So our church, for example, holds tea parties. We raised over £2,000 with the teas last year, and our church will struggle this year to make up that money. It's wonderful that you can join me. Let's now go and look at 3 very special gardens in Uppingham.
This is Hillside, that was built in 1905 by a master at Uppingham School.
About 8 years ago, when we had a bit more time, we decided to give the garden a considerable makeover.
We're going down through the garden, through the woodland walk, which was carved out of a jungle. It had got really overgrown, but it's now a very pleasant walk. If we turn to the right, we can see the top bed that we created and the flower bed on the left. And it's a nice lawn. And our 2 magnificent beech trees, which are wonderful. If we go on down the woodland walk, a new arch which has some very nice clematis growing on it.
So this is our bottom terrace. This we put in as part of the makeover about 7 or 8 years ago. Originally the lawn sloped up to where at the top of this terrace wall is, and was fairly useless. So we dug out about 4 or 5 feet of earth and put in the retaining wall, the terrace wall, which has been a very big improvement. These are our papaver, which are very glorious at this time of year. And on the left-hand side are the Iris siberica, which again is doing very, very well this year. This is the pond that we created as part of the makeover. It's fed by a spring at the back, which means that the water is very clear and fresh, and we're able to grow watercress.
This is our spring that rises just here and actually goes right through Uppingham and down to the other 2 gardens that you'll be seeing today. It runs all year round and has very fresh, clear water. And our hostas grow very well round about it. This is our wildflower garden that we planted for the bees, and the bees absolutely love it. And you can see the view down across our paddock, and the bees have a wonderful time with the wildflowers and in the paddock, and so do the sheep.
This is where the vegetable garden starts. We try to grow things that are difficult to obtain or taste much better when they're fresh. These are our fruit patch gooseberries, which always give a very good crop.
Well, about 3 years ago, when we purchased Robin Hill, our main ideas were to have a garden that was involved with facing south and having a quiet country feel. The garden was pretty much an open palette.
So the state of the garden was very plain. It was, as Kathy says, it was a clean palette. The bottom of the garden was completely overgrown, and we realized there was a stream there, so we wanted to uncover that. But really, as a gardener, to design and implement a garden, it was incredibly easy because all we had to do was make space for plants, and that's what we did. The first thing one really has to realize about this garden, it's a beautiful south-facing site. The garden is actually quite small, it's only about 1/4 of an acre. But we have this amazing borrowed landscape because we look out on the field ahead of us, and you quite often there are sheep and lambs there, which make it so pretty. And also we have a wonderful view across our 2 neighbours' gardens in that direction there, which gives this amazing tree landscape. You really feel you're in a much bigger space here than it actually is. So we're incredibly fortunate to have what we have around us. The thing we love are the terraces. We created these 2 terraces, which mean that we can be in the sun or in the shade more or less anytime we want.
I would say one of the highlights is for my swing that I received from Andrew for a 70th birthday present, and I use it every morning. Luckily, the neighbors can't see me swinging away in my white nightie. We have a Labrador Retriever, George, who needed a water spot, and so we created a pond. That's worked really well. We've got a few plants growing in it, and it's not exactly the most pristine because George uses it as a little swimming pool 3 or 4 times a day.
We came here in 1992 and the house was built in 1948.
The first owner, who was a master at the school, laid out the current framework of the garden. All the large mature trees you see around were planted by him. I always come out sometimes on mornings like this and feel so grateful for those courageous plant collectors from earlier centuries who brought in many of our plants. I mean, just along here, for example, from many different countries, we have the passion flower from South America and the grevillea from Australasia, the teucrium, the germander from the Mediterranean, the salvia from Mexico, and of course the wisteria come from China and Japan, and this is the Chinese one. Our style of gardening is to try and use a wide variety of plants. Now, for example, here I've tried to bring together a group of plants that don't necessarily rely on flower colour, but form and texture. So you've got the contrasting shape of the variegated pittosporum above, and then below it the golden choisya, and to the right the lovely foliage of the cardoon, and to the left this lovely acer, the bronze coloured acer. So we do try to be as sustainable as possible in the garden. For example, the lawn looks well mown today, probably more than usual, but I do encourage lots of little pockets of wildflowers in the lawn, especially around the trees. And we have bluebells, as you can see at the moment, and a good crop of daisies and buttercups in the meadow area, and cow parsley. Well, the streamside development here we carried out about 3 years ago. I think this is its third summer, and we planted a new wildlife-friendly hedge. So that contains all British natives, about 6 different forms, and makes a wonderful green pathway as well for wildlife underneath. The plant at the end with the pink flowers is the ornamental rhubarb, and a splendid plant for growing along waterside. The current highlights are the orange-flowered euphorbia griffithii, and the blue iris siberica. This is a little project we did just a few years ago. It's quite a small space, slightly below the main terrace, and we put in a small lion fountain against the wall, so you have the sound of the water running. And then climbing plants here like this climbing hydrangea, and baskets for seasonal colour, and the 2 aces and the ivies, the rosemary above, and there's a climbing clematis Hagley hybrid which will be flowering later in the season, and the clip box. And so there are lots of different elements that go to make up quite an attractive little space.
I do hope you've enjoyed these lovely gardens. Thank you for joining me. And please remember that the National Garden Scheme really does need the funds this year, so please give generously.